In the quiet streets of Saitama, Japan, a 17-year-old girl named Junko Furuta was living a normal teenage life. But her world was about to descend into a nightmare so horrifying that it would shock the nation and become one of the most disturbing crimes in human history. What started as an innocent refusal to a school bully's advances spiraled into 44 days of unimaginable suffering, torture so brutal that even seasoned investigators were left speechless. This is the story that haunts those who dare to hear it. Before tragedy struck, Junko Furuta was a bright 17-year-old high school student from Misato, Japan. Known for her quiet demeanor and dedication to her studies, she aspired to live independently and had recently taken a part-time job to buy her own scooter. Friends and teachers described her as kind and diligent, a young woman with a promising path. But Japan in the late 1980s, while economically booming, faced a troubling rise in youth delinquency and bullying. Schools, often slow to address these issues, struggled to protect students like Junko from the increasing aggression. Beneath her ordinary life, a darker societal trend was growing, one that would soon entangle her in a tragedy far beyond anything she could have imagined. The catalyst. As Junko navigated her daily life, lurking in the shadows was Hiroshi Miyano, a notorious school bully known for his volatile temper and ruthless behavior. Alongside his gang, Miyano had built a reputation for intimidation, preying on weaker students and using violence to assert his dominance. Their presence instilled fear, making the hallways of Junko's school feel less like a place of learning and more like a battleground. It was during a seemingly innocuous encounter that the course of Junko's life shifted dramatically. When Miyano made advances toward her, Junko stood her ground, firmly rejecting his unwanted attention. This moment of defiance, however courageous, set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Enraged by her rejection and fueled by a toxic mix of pride and anger, Miyano and his gang decided to take matters into their own hands, spiraling Junko into a nightmare she never anticipated: the abduction. On the evening of November 25, 1988, what began as an ordinary day for Junko quickly turned into a nightmare. As she left a friend's house and walked home, the streets felt eerily quiet, the chill of autumn hanging in the air. Unbeknownst to her, Miyano and his gang were lying in wait, their eyes set on her as a target. In a swift move, they cornered her in a dark alley and dragged her into a waiting vehicle. Her desperate cries were swallowed by the night as adrenaline surged through her. She fought back, but her pleas for help drowned in the engine's roar. Once inside their hideout, a seemingly abandoned house on the outskirts of town, the stark transition from safety to terror hit her like a cold wave. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate. With each step deeper into the house, dread settled in her stomach. The air was thick with fear and malice, a harbinger of the horrors to come. As she was thrust into a dimly lit room, panic clawed at her chest. The laughter of her captors echoed ominously, heightening her sense of dread. Junko realized this was no ordinary abduction. It marked the beginning of a prolonged nightmare. As her captors reveled in their control, she steeled herself, knowing she had to summon every ounce of strength to survive the ordeal ahead. The ordeal. Inside the dimly lit confines of the house, Junko faced a relentless barrage of terror. The gang, emboldened by their cruel intentions, stripped her of her autonomy, turning her into a mere pawn in their twisted game. They taunted her, their laughter echoing off the walls, mixing with her sobs and pleas for mercy. Each day blurred into the next, with time marked only by the cruelty of her captors and the deepening despair in her heart. Hiroshi Miyano emerged as the ringleader, his sadistic nature on full display. He reveled in Junko's fear, using it to assert control over her. The first night was the worst. It began with a chilling silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps approaching. They surrounded her, their shadows looming larger than life. As Miyano leaned in, a sinister grin plastered across his face. What began as verbal assaults quickly escalated into physical violence, each act meticulously calculated to instill fear and assert dominance. As days turned into weeks, Junko's reality transformed. The once vibrant girl, full of dreams and aspirations, became a ghost of herself, trapped in a nightmare that felt all too real. The gang's violent tendencies intensified, subjecting her to unimaginable horrors. They filmed their abuses, sharing the recordings among themselves, further dehumanizing her and robbing her of any semblance of dignity. In those moments, it felt as if the world outside had forgotten her entirely, leaving her to suffer in isolation. Yet even amid the despair, a flicker of resilience sparked within Junko. The bond she shared with her family, her friends, and her dreams lingered in the recesses of her mind, fueling her will to survive. In whispered moments of solitude, she clung to the hope that somehow, some way, she would escape this hell. The strength of her spirit became her lifeline, a fragile thread in a web of darkness, pushing her to endure against all odds. The fight for survival. Despite the overwhelming odds, Junko began to devise a plan. She meticulously observed her captors, noting their routines and weaknesses. Each day, her fear transformed into determination, a burning desire to reclaim her life. Then came a pivotal moment. One night, during a rare lapse in the gang's vigilance, Junko seized her chance. Heart pounding, she moved quickly, driven by adrenaline and the hope of escape. The dark corridors of the house felt suffocating, but the memory of her life before the abduction propelled her forward. As she navigated through the shadows, the taste of freedom lingered tantalizingly close. But she knew the danger was far from over. The climax of her struggle was nearing, and with it, the resolution of her unimaginable journey. In the face of insurmountable odds, Junko's fight for survival was just beginning. Aftermath. In the wake of Junko's tragic death, the discovery of her murder sent shockwaves through the community. Her family reported her missing, and as the investigation unfolded, the horrifying details of her abduction and the brutality she endured emerged. Law enforcement faced intense pressure to solve the case, and public outrage reached a boiling point as her story captured media attention. The trial that followed was a spectacle, with the nation riveted by the grim revelations. Junko's family bravely shared their heartbreak, while the defendants attempted to minimize their actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the sentences handed down were shockingly lenient. This stark failure of justice ignited a firestorm of criticism, prompting discussions about the treatment of victims and the need for reform in the legal system. The media's portrayal of the case highlighted the deep societal issues at play, sparking debates about school bullying, violence against women, and the responsibilities of authorities to protect the vulnerable. Junko's death became a rallying point for change, as advocates pushed for tougher penalties for such heinous crimes and greater awareness of the systemic failures that allowed her tragedy to occur. Her story, marked by profound loss, ultimately served as a call to action, emphasizing the urgent need for a society that prioritizes justice and compassion. The legacy. Junko Furuta's tragic story remains etched in the collective memory of Japan, a haunting reminder of the consequences of cruelty and indifference. Her murder sparked a nationwide outcry, shining a light on the systemic failures within the legal and educational systems that allowed such atrocities to occur. In the years following her death, discussions surrounding youth violence, bullying, and victim protection became more pronounced, leading to some reforms in Japan's laws regarding juvenile crime. However, the implementation of meaningful change remains sluggish and inconsistent. Despite these efforts, the legacy of Junko's ordeal underscores the ongoing challenges faced by victims of violence and the need for a more compassionate society. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how easily the lines between right and wrong can blur, leaving victims unheard and unprotected. Today, Junko's name continues to resonate, fueling conversations about justice, empathy, and the importance of standing against injustice in all its forms. The echoes of her suffering remind us of the urgent need for societal change and vigilance to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated.